Welcome back to the channel. At the end of this video, you will have 5 veteran players that in Dynasty, if you are already a contender and you're looking for just a little bit extra something to put you over the top, these 5 players can do it. And I'm using 3 real life trades that have been made in leagues in the last month to show you that generally these players can be had for relatively cheap. Now, I can't guarantee that anyone in your league that has these players will accept these trades, but these are real trades that have gone through in the last month. Please remember to like and subscribe. Let's get into it. The first player is veteran wide receiver Cooper Kupp of the Los Angeles Rams. So he's 6'2", 204, and he's 31.1 years old. Now, when we look at his points per game, in 2021, he had that crazy triple crown season where he led the league in both catches, yards, and touchdowns. And he averaged 25.9 points per game, obviously number 1 in the league. Well then, in 2022, he averaged 22.4 points per game and was still number 1, although he did deal with injuries. And this past season, he had 13.7 points per game and was 23rd in the league. Some of this past season, he was dealing with injuries during the games, which did appear to affect his ability. And while I don't think he's going to reach the heights of the 2021 or even 2022 season in terms of his points per game, with some of the prices that you can pay to get him, he is well going to be worth it to help you get a fantasy championship this year. So when we conceptualize the Rams offense, they still have Sean McVay as their offensive-minded head coach that runs his iteration of the Shanahan scheme. They still have the consistency at quarterback with Matt Stafford. He looked better this past season than he did the year before. Their run game is going to be solid with Kyren Williams, and they even have Blake Corum now to back him up. But when we think about their passing offense, before they were funneling it almost completely through Cooper Kupp, but then they obviously had Puka Nacua step up in a big way this past season. But when Cooper Kupp came back, Sean McVay featured both him and Puka Nacua. We saw that there was room in this offense for 2 very, very good wide receivers. Then when we look at the rest of the team, Demarcus Robinson, he's a fine wide receiver 3, but he's nothing special. Their tight end room isn't really that good. Tyler Higbee, for instance, suffered an ACL tear, so he's not going to be back at the beginning of the year and is older. It wasn't an elite tight end by any means anyways. So really, this passing offense is going to funnel through Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp. Another thing I want to mention, his route win rate and win rate versus man coverage improved from 2022 to 2023. His 52.2 route win rate overall was good for 19th in the NFL. Then his win rate versus man this past season of 44.8% was good for 16th in the NFL. Okay, so we know that he's winning his routes, and he was actually winning his routes at a better rate this past season despite his lower points per game. Okay, so let's look at the target share then. He had a 25.6 target share, which was good for 16th in the NFL. That is well within the target range necessary to be a wide receiver 2. Then when we look at his target rate, I did a video a couple weeks back where I detailed out that you need to have at least a 20% targets per route run rate in general to be a wide receiver 2. Well, his 25.6 target rate is well over that. In fact, it's closer to being a wide receiver 1 than it is being a wide receiver 2. Now, as I mentioned at the beginning of the video, I can't guarantee that anyone will accept these trades, but these are real trades that have been made in fantasy leagues within the past month. Cooper Kupp was sold for Gus Edwards. Gus Edwards is going to be a starting running back, but he's going to be in a timeshare with J.K. Dobbins to begin with. But they still have Kamani Vidal, so even if J.K. Dobbins were to go down, Gus Edwards would still be in a timeshare. I would much rather have a wide receiver that is capable of being a solid wide receiver 2 than a timeshare running back that I guess I could throw in my flex. I mean, I'd much rather have Cooper Kupp, to be honest with you. Then when we look at the next trade, Cooper Kupp was sold for Javonte Williams. Now, while I do think that Javonte Williams in redraft is a very good value, Javonte Williams was not drafted by Sean Payton. He has no loyalty to Javonte Williams. In fact, he drafted Audric Estime, who, in my opinion, is the exact replacement for Javonte Williams. So while I think that Javonte Williams can be a fine RB3 for you in redraft, him being sold for Cooper Kupp, somebody that can be a wide receiver 2 for you for at least one more year, possibly 2, I would much rather have Cooper Kupp. Then the final trade, Cooper Kupp for Sam Darnold. Now, this is contingent on your league. If you are desperate for a quarterback and you are in a 12 or greater man league, you may rather have Sam Darnold, especially if you don't have a third quarterback. That would be absolutely understandable. But if you're in a, say, 10-man league, or if Sam Darnold is your fourth quarterback and you just need extra wide receiver depth, if you need another wide receiver just for some depth, or if that would really put you over the top, Cooper Kupp can be bought because Sam Darnold will not be starting after this season. There is no way. Whereas Cooper Kupp could have years of value. Although, absolutely, I understand that if you are in a 12 or a greater man league and he isn't your fourth quarterback, why you would much rather just keep him for the sake of being able to roster 3 starting quarterbacks this year. But if not, if he is your fourth quarterback and you can't afford to unload him, Cooper Kupp is going to be a fantastic value here because he has probably 2 years, maybe more, remaining in the league. And at the very least this year, he can provide you solid wide receiver 2 production. The next veteran that can be had for really, really cheap is Diontae Johnson of the Carolina Panthers. So while people, I think, view him generally as an older veteran wide receiver, he's not even 28 years old. Wide receivers that are good can play well into their 30s. Now, he isn't an elite asset or anything, but wait till you see what you can buy him for, or at least what multiple people have been able to trade in order to acquire him. So when we look at his points per game, his 17.2 in 2021 were good for 8th. Then he did dip down to 10.6, which was the 39th most, and then up a little bit to 11.8, which was also 39th. Well, let's think about this. They went from Ben Roethlisberger that season in 2021, an established quarterback who was a good quarterback. Still, even in that point in his career, he was capable of reading defenses and getting the ball out, even if his arm strength wasn't what it once was and his health was generally deteriorating. That's the last time he's had anything remotely close to good at quarterback. Then he had Kenny Pickett for 2 years. You saw the direct downfall of his stats. And I will say in 2022, he was the unluckiest wide receiver ever. He had 0 touchdowns. That is an anomaly. He would have finished much higher that year, even with Kenny Pickett being his quarterback. Then when we look at his 2023 season, he only played in 13 games, and in one of those games he was hurt and only played about half of the snaps. So that did hurt his points per game just a little bit. But here's the thing. He is now in a completely different offense. And when we think about this offense, it's the Dave Canales offense. You saw what he was able to do to Geno Smith in 2022, his career resurrection. And then what he was able to do for Baker Mayfield this past season in his career resurrection. If there is anyone that is going to be able to resurrect Bryce Young's admittedly very disastrous rookie season, it's Dave Canales. He is the QB whisperer. Then when we think about what they've done, they brought in Jonathan Brooks in the second round. They traded up in order to acquire him. So yes, at first there isn't necessarily going to be the most consistent running game, but that might force them to pass just a little bit more. And Diontae Johnson is generally going to be their flanker. They have Adam Thielen still in the slot, and then they're probably going to play Xavier Legette at vertical X. I guess they could try putting Jonathan Mingo there again. That was an absolute disaster, though. And then they drafted J.T. Sanders, and they still have Tommy Tremble at tight end. So the wide receiver 1 in this offense is going to be Diontae Johnson. And just to show you, you remember how he had wide receiver 39 finishes the past 2 seasons? Well, look at his target quality rating and catchable target rate. 64th among the NFL in quality and 70th in catchable target rate. It's hard to be a good wide receiver when your passes aren't even catchable. I mean, people just look at raw stats sometimes, in terms of the raw receptions and yards, and just take it as somebody's actually bad. How on earth was he supposed to be an elite wide receiver with that kind of target quality and catchable target rate? But then when we look at his share of the offense, his 41.5% dominator rating, which is his team's total market share of the yards and touchdowns, was good for third in the NFL. So he basically was the offense. Even if the total offense was just terrible, he was the offense. This offense is not going to be remotely close to as bad as he's had in Pittsburgh. Say what you want about Bryce Young and his struggles with height and being able to see over the middle. Dave Canales is going to work around these weaknesses and work to Bryce Young's strengths. He's going to set him up easy targets on the boundaries, and that's where Diontae Johnson is going to eat. So these are 3 real trades that have been done in leagues. Diontae Johnson was bought for a 2025 second-round pick. Now, I know we're coming off a draft in 2024 where the second round looks really good this season, but think about 2023, especially 2022, and a lot of 2021. These second round picks in general, and especially this is considering you're probably a contender if you're getting Diontae Johnson. I'm guessing this is not going to be the 201. It would make no sense for this guy to buy Diontae Johnson. If you're buying him for a late second round pick in the future when we don't have any idea if the second round's even going to be good anyways, I would much rather just have the sure thing in Diontae Johnson and buy the dip on him. Another thing, these second round picks in general have a 31 to 39% success rate in terms of hitting on your draft pick. So you're basically taking a lottery ticket for about at best, 40% chance at getting anything or just getting Diontae Johnson. And it's actually, the lower you go, it's worse than that. I would much rather just have the sure thing. Then when you look at the middle trade, he was sold for Javonte Williams and a 2025 third round pick. So Javonte Williams, once again, this is in the Dynasty context here. He is on essentially a one-year deal. His replacement in Audric Estime was drafted this season. So yes, while Javonte Williams is going to be able to be a solid RB3 in my opinion, I would much rather have the wide receiver 1 in a Dave Canales offense that the last time he had good quarterback play or just okay quarterback play, he was the wide receiver 8 in fantasy points per game, than a probable RB3 for 1 year and then who knows, and a 2025 third round pick. So in general, an early third round pick has about a 25% chance of hitting, and a late one is about 22%. So you're probably buying at worst a low end wide receiver 2 for an RB3 that doesn't have anything guaranteed in the future, and at best a 25% chance at hitting anything. I would much rather just have Diontae Johnson because I think he's going to be better than a low-end wide receiver 2 personally, but I would much rather have even a low-end wide receiver 2 than a 1-year RB3 and a 25% chance at best at hitting anything. And that's not even necessarily guaranteeing that it's a stud. It's just that you're going to hit on something. Then when we look at the third trade, Diontae Johnson was sold for a 2025 second and 2025 third round pick. So he was sold for, at best, a 40% chance at hitting anything, and at best, a 25% chance at hitting anything. So essentially 2 lottery tickets. And I'm using early second round and early third round lottery chances in this trade. If it's late, it's about a 31% chance and then a 22% chance at hitting anything. I would much rather just have Diontae Johnson. The next player on this list is veteran running back Raheem Mostert of the Miami Dolphins. So he's 5'11", 205 pounds, and now while he is 32.3 years old, his career arc is very strange and different from most people's. He's been used sparingly throughout most of his career, and then in 2022, he averaged 10.5 points per game, which was good for the RB29, and then he had a massive season this past year with 17.9 points per game, which was good for 4th. Now, admittedly, this was buoyed by 18 rushing touchdowns and 3 receiving touchdowns. Is that likely to repeat? No. Is it likely to be close to that? No. But it's still likely to be a season of, say, 7 to at most maybe 10 touchdowns. Just wait till you see what you can get him for. It is very, very low. So when we think about the Dolphins, Mike McDaniel's their head coach. Just like with Sean McVay before, he was with the 2013 Washington team. He runs his own iteration of the Shanahan scheme. He uses a lot more motion, though, to get his receivers free releases. So the Dolphins quarterback is Tua Tagovailoa. He is one of the more accurate quarterbacks and is very good when he gets in a rhythm. He just doesn't provide anything in terms of a rushing upside, which is actually very, very good for the running backs. Then you have Raheem Mostert, who's more than likely going to, at the very least this season, get most of the carries. Then you have Devon Achane, who's going to be used as a change of pace back, and he's very, very explosive and a very good running back. And now they did draft Jalen Wright, who I do like for the future. But this season, I do project that Raheem Mostert, at least to start the year and barring injury, is going to get most of the carries. Then they have Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle on the outside. They even brought in OBJ, and Jonnu Smith is a solid receiver, but a much better blocker. This is a very good situation for him. When we look at his juke rate, his 24.8% this past season was good for 7th in the NFL. When we look at his 58 evaded tackles in total, that was good for 10th in the NFL. When we look at his breakaway run rate, his 6.7% was good for 6th in the NFL. And his 14 breakaway runs were good for 4th. This guy was a very good running back. He wasn't just incredibly lucky to be scoring touchdowns. Now, he was lucky to have 21 touchdowns, but he performed very, very well. The stats do not lie. Even if you are given free lanes to block, you don't have a juke rate like that or the evaded tackles like that. You have to do that yourself. It doesn't matter what blocking you get. So these are 3 trades that have all been made in the past month. Raheem Mostert was sold for the 308. Think about that, the 308. That is much closer to the 22% chance that you even hit on anything, let alone something that's going to give you more value than Raheem Mostert. I would much rather just have a guaranteed season from Raheem Mostert if I'm a contender and I need a running back than a 22% chance that I get anything. Then when we look at the next trade, Treylon Burks and a 2025 third-round pick for Raheem Mostert. Treylon Burks is on the roster bubble. And in one of my Dynasty leagues, I did draft Treylon Burks in 2022. I deeply regret it. If I could sell him in a late third in 2025 for Raheem Mostert and I needed a running back, I would easily do that. I tried to get rid of Treylon Burks in a couple of my leagues, and I couldn't get anything of value for him. So once again, I would much rather have a, for sure, at least this season, running back in Raheem Mostert than a roster bubble wide receiver and a 22% chance that I get anything. Then when we look at the third trade, it was a 3rd and 4th round pick for Raheem Mostert. And I don't have data for hit rates in the 4th round, but I guarantee you it's way worse than 3rd round. So essentially, you're getting Raheem Mostert for at best, a 25% chance at anything, and then a much worse chance at anything in the 4th round. I would, once again, if I'm a contender, just get Raheem Mostert. The 4th player, if you are a contender to trade for, is Texans running back Joe Mixon. When we look at 2021, his 18.0 points per game were good for 5th. Then it did go down to 16.1, which was good for 7th in 2022, before dipping again to 15.7, which was good for 11th in 2023. The thing is, he was in a decent situation to begin with. He is going to a fantastic situation now. And by the way, he has a 30.1 BMI, so as we all know, he's been used as a workhorse, but he does have the body type to be used as a workhorse. And by the way, age 28 in data studied from 2000 to 2020 is the last age in general when running backs can have a peak season of production. So he does have at least one more year statistically that he has a chance at giving you elite production. So like I said, he was in a fine situation in Cincinnati. And just like 2 of the 3 players mentioned before, he now finds himself in a Shanahan scheme, courtesy of Bobby Slowick, the offensive coordinator. He also was a member of the 2013 Washington team. Look at his situation. He has CJ Stroud as his quarterback, who had arguably the best rookie season of any quarterback ever. Then they have Stephon Diggs, Nico Collins, and Tank Dell, three very good wide receivers. Dalton Schultz is an above average tight end. And then they have Joe Mixon. This is going to be a very, very high powered offense. And his main competition is Dameon Pierce. Dameon Pierce is the most mid running back ever. And when we look at his total evaded tackles, his 53 this past season were good for 14th in the NFL, so above average. Then his 990 total yards created were good for 6th in the entire NFL. Those are yards that he had to create himself, things that are not given to him by his own blocking. He is a very, very good running back, and he was this past season, despite his dip in total production, which I do think was partially to blame due to the injury of Joe Burrow, which greatly reduced the efficiency of the offense and made it easier to focus on the run. And then he's a fine receiver too. His 1.4 yards per out run this past year were good for 16th in the NFL. So this guy has the 3-down ability, the body type to do it. He's still within the age range historically to be able to have a good season. And this past season, he didn't show anything that tells us that he's really, really declining. So when we look at these three trades, the first one was Joe Mixon for a 2025 second-round pick. Once again, that is around a 31 to 39% chance that you hit on anything, or just Joe Mixon. If you are a contender, it's going to be a late second-round pick, which reduces the odds generally. I would much rather just have Joe Mixon if I need a running back to help put me over the top. Then the middle trade, Joe Mixon and a second-round pick for James Cook. Now, this is just my personal opinion. I think James Cook is just about, besides Rachaad White, the most overvalued running back in fantasy football. James Cook, for instance, is not going to get any goal line work. They have Ray Davis and Josh Allen. So rushing touchdowns, you can kiss those goodbye. They're going to be losing a lot. So he is going to be a relatively safe floor running back. But he just does not have the touchdown upside to generally be an elite running back. Well, Joe Mixon does have the upside to be an elite running back this season. So if I'm a contender, I want an elite running back this season. And then you're also getting a second-round pick back. So sure, it's only, like a 40% chance at best. It was 39% actually chance at best of getting anything historically. And if I'm a contender and I really need a running back that I can trust to give me very, very good RB1 production this season, I'm taking my chances in Joe Mixon in this Texans offense. And then I'm taking a lottery ticket that I can just sell for something for sure next season. And the third trade, Joe Mixon for a 2026 second-round pick. Once again, that's a lottery ticket 2 years down the road, or a guaranteed running back right now to help put me over the top and secure my running back position. If I'm a contender and I want to win now, I would much rather just have Joe Mixon. The fifth and final player, if you're a contender and you're looking for that final piece to really set you over the edge, is Keenan Allen of the Chicago Bears. So he's 6'2", 206, and now while he is 32.3 years old, if we look at his fantasy points per game the past 3 seasons, he's gone up every year. In 2021, his 16.1 points per game were good for 11th. In 2022, his 16.4 were good for 11th. And then this past season, his 21.5 were good for 3rd. So while he might be getting a little bit older, from a fantasy perspective, he was only getting better. So he goes to the Chicago Bears, and now while I think that Caleb Williams is going to be a fantastic quarterback even in year one, it would be unfair and just unintelligent, in my opinion, to project him to be able to support 3 elite wide receivers in the sense of giving them very, very good fantasy seasons. It could happen, don't get me wrong, but probably not going to happen. I think DJ Moore is going to be the number one more often than not this season, although I do think that Keenan Allen is going to be the wide receiver 2 most weeks, and on a week-to-week basis, depending on matchups, especially if they have a poor slot cornerback that they're facing, is potentially going to be the wide receiver 1 a couple weeks here and there. And Rome Odunze is going to eventually step up, and I do believe in him long term. But Keenan Allen's going to eat from the slot. He's going to be Caleb Williams' security blanket. He's one of the best route runners in the NFL. And when we look at his fantasy points per route run this past season, his 0.56 was good for 9th. That is very, very good. His 2.48 yards per route run were good for 11th. His formation adjusted yards per route run of 2.15 was also good for 11th. And his yards per team pass attempt of 2.58 was good for 8th. And now, while I do think he's going to be the number 2 target on this team, sometimes the wide receiver 1, depending on the week and the matchup, I think that's going to bring you a very, very safe floor with potential upside from week to week if he's able to score. So these are 3 trades that have been made in real fantasy leagues in the past month. So you have Jahan Dotson going for Keenan Allen. There have been reports that Jahan Dotson is on the roster bubble. He was severely overrated thanks to 7 touchdowns after his rookie year. And now, while I do think he's a little bit better than his stats suggest this past season, and now if I'm a contender and I'm looking for somebody with a very safe floor with the potential for spike weeks, I would much rather just have Keenan Allen if I'm trying to win now. So in the second trade, using a 12-team format in Superflex, he went for the 210. That is either going to be Ben Sinnott or Troy Franklin. If I'm a contender, I don't think either one of those guys are going to push me over the top, but Keenan Allen is going to. Then when we look at the third trade, a 2026 second-round pick for Keenan Allen. If I'm a contender and I want to win this season, I am fine giving away a second-round pick in 2026. And now, while I wouldn't advise trading away first-round picks in the future in case your team has a down year, they get injured, or especially if your team is older and you don't project yourself to be good for that much longer and your window's going to be closed, a second-round pick, like I said, in the best odds is going to be around a 39% chance of hitting generally. If I'm trying to win now, I just want Keenan Allen. Remember that Cooper Kupp is more than likely going to be a wide receiver too. Even with Puka Nacua there, he was targeted as a low-end wide receiver 1 on a per-snap basis, and his win rate versus man coverage and overall both went up. Then when we think about Deontay Johnson, he received the 70th most catchable target rate this past season, and he was stuck in a Kenny Pickett offense while having the 3rd highest dominator rating, his team market share of the yards and touchdowns of any wide receiver. Despite the fact that he didn't have a good season particularly, that was in 13 games, but he was the offense. And the third player is Dolphins running back Raheem Mostert. Remember that his 24.8% juke rate was good for 7th in the NFL. His 58 evaded tackles were good for 10th in the NFL. His 6.7 breakaway run rate was good for 6th in the NFL. And his 14 total breakaway runs were good for 4th. He's in the exact same situation and didn't show any signs of decline. And he can be had for a 3rd rounder in some leagues that has about a 22% hit rate to a max of 25%. Then Joe Mixon is the 4th player. Now, while he has declined in points per game, he's going to a much better offense. It's a Shanahan offense run by Bobby Slowick. It's going to be impossible to defend the run because they have 3 stud wide receivers and CJ Stroud, as well as even Dalton Schultz. He's still 28 years old, which historically does give him one more season to have a very, very big year. And then the 5th player is Keenan Allen of the Chicago Bears. Remember, the past 3 seasons, his points per game went up. He was 3rd in the NFL this past season. He might be declining just a little bit, but he is still a very, very good receiver. And now, while he isn't going to be the elite wide receiver 1 that can give you a top 10 finish, he's still very safe to be the number 2 in this Caleb Williams-led offense and should be the number 1 wide receiver depending on the matchup from week to week. He's going to give you a very safe floor with the opportunity for a lot of upside if he's able to score a touchdown any given week. So those are 5 players that if you are a contender and you are in need of a wide receiver or running back, I think that you can get at a good value and can help put you over the top while not giving away too much to really hurt your future. But what do you think? Do you agree? Do you disagree? Who, if you are a contender, are you looking to purchase at a value? Please let me know in the comment section. With that being said, I'm the Fantasy Football Strategist, your NFL breaking news source, and the Dynasty and Redraft implications behind said breaking news. I am building a library of information with which you can use to dominate your Redraft and Dynasty leagues in 2024 and beyond. Please remember to like and subscribe. It would mean the absolute world to me. Thank you and have a good day.